Hear from Catherine Siri. Catherine, we're going to unmute you so we can hear you too.
Uh, Lost her. There we go.
There you go.
You should be good now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good to see all of you. Thank you for having me. So I have a presentation if you'd like to see it, since we're on Zoom. I don't know if I can share my screen. Oh, I can. Okay. Let's see if this is it's showing that. Might not work. Share. It doesn't let me share.
Let me see if I
Here
can.
we go. Maybe this will work.
Yep.
Oh, now it's blue. Okay, here we are. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so this, Lewis asked me to come speak about PFAS. PFAS is a group of chemicals that are highly bonded. They are resistant to water, oil, heat, stains, grease, so they're very useful. But unfortunately, they don't easily degrade in the environment and they can accumulate in humans. So there's some concerns about health effects related to PFAS. And here's just some, I put this presentation in the chat, so I might skip over some of this stuff. So if you have any questions, you see something of interest, let me know. So every 5 years, the EPA comes out with a list of emerging concern contaminants that are not yet regulated. And so they have all the water agencies in the country test for these contaminants, and so they can determine where they are, how prevalent they are, what the concentrations are. And at the same time, they study the health effects and they decide whether or not they're going to regulate the chemical. So we tested for PFAS. There's thousands of these chemicals, but we're currently the list that we're testing for. There's about 29. And we found two of these chemicals at a higher level. They're most common of all the PFAS chemicals, PFOA and PFOS, and higher levels of PFOA specifically. So we have two different treatment plants. One treatment plant is running around 9, and the other one is running between 12 and 14. Right now, the California limit is 10. So one of our treatment plants is below the California limit. The EPA was at 70, but now they're proposing a new limit that's not yet been adopted of 4 for PFOA and also for PFOS. So one of the reasons they're setting this so low in drinking water is because the EPA is trying to keep the exposure from drinking water to only 20% of your exposure. Normally, drinking water contaminants, you only have them in your drinking water. But in this case, they're assuming that 80% of your exposure is going to be from your environment and not just your drinking water. So we got together with the board and we determined that, of course, the first thing we need to do is remove the PFAS from our drinking water. And so we fast-tracked a contract with an engineer to design a treatment plan for us for our 2 treatment plants. We also applied for funding from the State Water Board because it's going to be very expensive. And these are some of the treatments we're looking at. The second thing we're doing is trying to understand where these chemicals are coming from. So we're conducting a lot of sampling right now to try to understand how they got there. So we are dedicated to a scientific method to make a determination if we can. we don't want to jump to any conclusions. We want to try to let the data speak for itself. So right now we have an observation and we have a question, where are these coming from? We also want to track where they're going. And so right now we're in the research phase. We're doing a lot of sampling. We're also very aware of our biases, and everyone is going to have their own bias in this situation. So once we have more data, we can come up with a hypothesis and then continue with this until we can reach a conclusion. We are also reaching out to a lot of experts, and we're getting a lot of help as well to make this conclusion. So this is just a quick look at how the hydrology of our watersheds works. Most of the water flows from south to north and ends up in the Mojave River. Grass Valley watershed is separate from the Lake Arrowhead watershed. And then Papoose Lake over here has its own little watershed, and no water transfers between those the two watersheds. So there is some, I meant between Papoose and Lake Arrowhead, there is a little bit of water moving from Grass Valley Lake to Lake Arrowhead, and it is possible also to move water from Lake Arrowhead to Grass Valley Lake. So these are some of the sampling locations that we've been looking at, trying to find sources. And this is just a kind of a high level of what we've noticed so far. There are the highest levels of PFOA in Lake Arrowhead itself, and none of the other tributaries seem to have any level equivalent to Lake Arrowhead for this one chemical, which is curious. Our groundwater is below the limits. 3 out of the 5 wells have no PFAS detected. We found higher levels of PFOS, the second chemical, coming from Emerald Bay Creek and Grass Valley Creek. So we are sampling higher up in that tributary and narrowing it down. Right now, we're seeing higher levels coming from the Cedar Glen Fork. And on the Grass Valley side, we're seeing higher levels coming from the clubhouse area, upstream of the country club. And then Grass Valley Lake has similar higher levels of PFOS, similar to that clubhouse drainage. And Papoose Lake, which is all by itself over there, has lower levels in Lake Arrowhead, but still has these chemicals present. And then our recycled water and our wastewater are just actually have a little bit lower levels in Lake Arrowhead and Grass Valley Lake. And so we're looking at different sources. Septic is a possibility. We have some older septic systems in granitic soil, which isn't really conducive to good percolation. We're also aware of a lot of washing machines that people who have septic often don't let their washing machine go through their septic. And so they kind of treat it like gray water, either going into a drainage or into, their yard. So we need to start looking at some of these things. There's also the, polluted runoff from like construction yards and that kind of thing. Also, roofing material has a lot of PFAS in it because of the weatherproofing, outdoor furniture, and these are just all possibilities that we're looking at. Possible recreational activities in Lake Arrowhead itself. These are just some samples of different marine-related products that have PFAS. So we are also looking at recycled water, if it's possible that it is contributing to PFAS in Lake Arrowhead. Mathematically, it's not possible that it is the only source of PFAS because we only deliver 210 acre-feet per year on average to the country club, which is less than 0.5% of the volume of the lake. So if we even if all of the recycled water got into Lake Arrowhead, it couldn't be responsible for the levels that are in Lake Arrowhead now. And even if Grass Valley Lake, we're contaminated, which has lower levels of PFOA, but there's about 527 acre feet that are transferred to Lake Arrowhead every year, which is about 1% of the volume of Lake Arrowhead. So I guess the point here is that, I mean, recycled water is very highly regulated. The Country Club is inspected to make sure there's no overspray, there's no pooling of recycled water. They do everything they can to keep recycled water from running off. If they're, I mean, but of course there's a possibility that it could run off in a rainstorm and get into Grass Valley Lake, where it would be diluted there and then again diluted in Lake Arrowhead. So it's, I'm not saying that there's no recycled water getting in Lake Arrowhead, but it is just not a silver bullet that is going to solve our problems. And then there's sewer. So we've heard there's people saying it's that our sewer is leaking into Lake Arrowhead, and that is absolutely our number one priority on the wastewater side, that our sewer is not getting out. There's no sewage seeping out at all. It is, again, highly regulated. And if there were a leak from a sewer line, it would be a number one priority of my district. You would see half of the district running to stop it and fix it. I mean, it's just so. Sewer systems are designed to take advantage of gravity. So obviously the lowest point in the Lake Arrowhead watershed is Lake Arrowhead. So we have a sewer main that completely surrounds Lake Arrowhead, and 90% of that sewer main has been slip lined in the last 10 years. And we're working on the last 10%. You might have noticed that project we had going on in North Bay this year. We had to move some docks, and that was a slip lining project. So the other thing about wastewater too is, again, for wastewater to be responsible for all the PFOA in Lake Arrowhead, you would have to have high amounts of sewage in Lake Arrowhead, because it's just not, the levels of PFOA in wastewater are just not as high as Lake Arrowhead. And if you had that much sewage in Lake Arrowhead, you would have a bacteriological problem as well. I mean, there's a lot of other things in wastewater than just PFAS. So there's just some other examples of places where you could find PFAS that are a possibility. Firefighting foam is probably a low probability. Speaking to our firefighters in our area, doesn't seem like they've been using for training or anything like that. But PFOA is one of the most highly transported PFAS chemicals through the atmosphere. And so it's found in air pollution, and it's also found in rainwater. So anyway, just possibilities. These are some resources. Our website has all the latest data. We keep it updated as soon as we find out anything new. This week we had some new results from North Bay and from the groundwater, and they're very consistent with prior results. But you can check that out on our website. Here's some other resources. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Catherine, you have one question in the chat from Trudy. It says, I read online that artificial grass might be a source of PFAS. Has that been investigated?
Yes, unfortunately, artificial grass does have PFAS, and it's difficult. We have so many priorities. Obviously, drinking water quality is number one, and drought resiliency is another. So it is kind of a catch-22 for us, but yes, that is a source.
Are there any other questions for Catherine?